don't like being in the picture.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Instagram Live. No one's here yet. It's hard to talk when there's absolutely no one here. But,
I'm here.
9 others just joined. Oh, Robin is here. What have you been doing? I just got out of a podcast 1 minute ago, so I'm like 1 minute late for this IG Live, but really appreciate everybody showing up. Hello, Jeannine. Hello, Lydia. Hello. Where's Jay?
There he is.
Where's Jay? Jay. Oh, there you are. Jay, I'm waving to you. And Jay, send over the link for the, hey, Jack, Paul. Jay, send over the link. And we'll be answering some questions. Hey, Kendra, how are you doing? Stories. What's the name of your book, Kendra? It's a very important book about storytelling in business. I've read it. It's on my night table, actually, but I just forget the title. Jay, I'll get your link in a second. But a couple of things. I want to start off with the bullshit headline of the day. So every day we have a bullshit headline of the day, and then the honest headline of the day. Once again, the bullshit headline of the day is at CNN, my favorite network. CNN, I remember when, I remember like 25 years ago, Time Warner bought CNN, and I was working for Time Warner at the time. I was working at HBO, and literally we'd run into people who worked at like Fox News, and we'd feel like getting into a fight with them. Like, I was loyal to every Time Warner property. I was loyal to CNN at that point, and I thought they were a great news network. They were the first news network. Like Ted Turner was a genius for thinking that there was a 24-hour-a-day appetite for news. And then the first Iraq war happened, and everybody was just glued to CNN all the time. And he was kind of a genius. Wow, people can't see you. You gotta.
Okay.
No. We gotta. You're prettier than me. We gotta let people see you. Hey, Max, how are you doing? But then CNN. What happened? Like, I guess CNN was run by, I don't know. Did CNN fall apart, or is it always the same? And now I'm just seeing the BS.
Maybe they just liked all the attention that they got, and so now they're not getting it.
Yeah.
They have to create it. I don't know.
So here's the bullshit headline of the day, and it's the number one headline on CNN.com right now. So it says, a COVID-19 spike is coming for southern states, study warns. So here's why this is BS. Okay, if they said a COVID-19 spike is happening right now for southern states, that would be news. But it's not really news that some random study, I could write a study too, that says a spike is not coming, right? I can write a study because there's research about the effects of heat and humidity on coronavirus. I can write a study that includes examples from Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Sweden, England, and I can show that or even New York City, and I could show that a spike is not soon coming. I mean, maybe one will come in September, but it's probably not going to happen now. And here's the subheadline. It says, the Miami area, parts of Texas, Alabama, Tennessee will see rapid surges in new COVID-19 cases. You know what? They have been saying this.
Yeah, how long?
They have been saying this for over a month now. So why? See, Robin's looking good. That's why you have to stay in the frame. Why do they have to say a study warns, and that's the main headline? Are they just trying to scare us? Are they just trying to say, like, what's the point? And we also know that all of these studies, all of these mathematical models, the one thing we've learned through this crisis is that you can't just trust one mathematical model. And everyone says, oh, well, I'm going to trust the experts. Oh, yeah? Then why do you get a second opinion when you go to the doctor's office? Because even the experts could be wrong. And all of these mathematical models are wrong. The first model that I saw predicted 140 million deaths around the world. The second one said 10 million deaths. That's the Neil Ferguson Imperial model. The third one said 2 million deaths. The fourth one said, million deaths in the U.S. And now, okay, I don't even know what this study is. You know what? I'm going to click on and see what this amazing study, where does it come from? Heading into Memorial Day weekend, a study predicts some southern locations are poised for sharp upticks in deaths. So where is this study? They don't even. Oh, according to that's. Where's the study? I don't even see where the study is. And it says southern humidity won't eliminate virus. Study says. Okay, what study? It's the senior scholar in the Center for Clinical Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the University of Pennsylvania. So, all right. So one professor at one university.
But they don't show the study.
Yeah, they don't show the study. They just quote him. The areas of South that our models project have a high risk, not saying it will happen, but just there's a risk in the next few weeks, blah, blah, blah. So
when was it dated? See, that's the whole thing, too. That could have been in February.
They quoted him from today. But the point is, why is that even news? It'll be news after. First off, it's not the most important news of the day. Second off, he's just one opinion. We've never been through this. He has no idea. It's not like he's measuring how many bats are in Miami so that all of a sudden coronavirus is going to come back. Like, there's no evidence about anything here in terms of, we haven't seen a second surge or a second wave in any country or state yet. So how can he specifically predict it in Miami?
Right.
Like, he must be against Miami somehow. And it's just ludicrous then that, why is that propelled? Like, what about the studies that say the reverse? Because there's USC, there's plenty of studies that say reverse. Why aren't those in the headlines or quoted? I feel like news now, when I was a kid, news used to say, okay, if we get a quote from this person, let's get a quote from the opposite side,
right,
to be fair and balanced. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't exist anymore. So, okay, question from Patrick. James, is your daughter single? Well, we have 4 daughters, and they're all, their ages are
18, 19, 21.
I can't even, 18.
We have 18, 19, 21. And then John is 21.
And
so 18, 19, 21.
As far as I know, the boy, John, the son, is the only one who is not single. But that doesn't mean they're available. Just be warned. So
yeah, he's not available.
So well, and they might not be either. The girls, Patrick. So CNN BS headline of the day. Of course, I'm going to go to the most truthful lane you're bringing up, fair and balanced news. Let's actually go to a website that truly is fair and balanced news, cosmopolitan.com. And I just love this site. Like, yeah, they have no agenda, and they just tell the truth. Like, here's the 7 best long-distance apps for couples. So if you're in a long-distance relationship, here's something called the Love Nudge, which is, it's based on the idea of the 5 love languages, which is a book by Gary Chapman, which is a guy I should get on the podcast. Yeah, and the app creates challenges for you and your partner based on the 5 love languages. Boom. Love it. Great app. That's probably a really easy app to make. Here's Gotham Card Decks is one. The Gottman Institute is that institute. They're the one. Yeah. They also should come on the podcast. They're the ones. Yeah. The Gottman Institute. They can just look at you and tell if your relationship is going to work or not within 5 seconds. So this app gives you access to 14 card decks with more than 1,000 flashcards, activities like love maps to better know your partner, ideas for date night, salsa cards for improving your intimacy. The app is blah, blah, blah. We should download these apps. This is good even if you're not long distance. Yeah. Oh, here's an app called Without. And it's designed for long distance relationships in mind. You could send selfie notes, other messages, gives you updates on their local weather and time and news in case you're far away. All right, Without connects you with only one other person, so that there is no worry that your partner is connecting with other people. So that's good. I don't want you connecting with other people if you're in the other room and we're having a intra-room long-distance relationship. Oh, I like this Cosmopolitan article as well. 10 body language signs to brush up on before your next Zoom date.
That's so funny.
So what is the first one? They're blinking very fast. That means they're interested in you because they're kind of nervous a little bit and fast blinking is a little sign of nervousness, and they're trying to make a good impression, so they blink very fast. Or they're blushing, that's a more obvious one. They're smiling continuously, but make sure they're not doing a fake smile. Make sure that that their eyes smile while their mouth smiles. Because a fake smile is when just the mouth smiles and the eyes don't crinkle up. You know if something's a real smile if both the mouth and the eyes are smiling. Here's a question. How different will New York City look in 2 years as a result of this pandemic? Do you think the city will be changed forever? Robin, what do you say?
I think it will be changed forever, but it'll be almost back to normal maybe in 2 years. I don't know.
Well, so what will be changed forever?
The amount of businesses that are
So there'll be fewer
open.
businesses.
I think that the real estate's going to be pretty crappy, so.
Well, if there's no businesses here, commercial real estate's going to fall apart. There's also less reason to move here.
Right.
Because people move here for the business opportunities and for the culture. And if both things are less, then I do think the major cities will have a hard time coming back.
Even like Facebook, they're not. They're going to change everything where they're going to be staying at home from now on.
Yeah, so Facebook,
like,
many tech companies have just announced that it's now, WFH is like an acronym now. All these tech companies are announcing work from home plans. So if everyone's working from home,
Definitely.
then you could live anywhere. So I think also, I think New York City I compare New York City now a little bit to downtown New York City during 9/11, where it was just a ghost town, but then things came back. But now, I think the reason things came back is because you still couldn't avoid New York City. If you wanted to conduct business, New York City was the place where all the money was, and so you had to conduct business here. But that's no longer the case. Even now, real estate prices are going up in all the areas that New York City people flee to, and we can always meet on Zoom or IG Live or whatever to conduct business now. You couldn't do that after 9/11. You couldn't even do that after 2008, 2009. The financial crisis happened. People thought New York City would empty out, and it did a little bit, but then it came back stronger than ever because there wasn't the bandwidth we have now to have events like this or to have communication like this. So, the other thing is, though, don't just go anywhere. I do think college towns will not be as exciting anymore because colleges are going to have problems. I mean, something like 30% of colleges are going to go out of business almost immediately. But I do think second-tier cities like Austin, Boulder, maybe San Diego, maybe Miami, all these cities, I mean, I'm already seeing evidence right now. Like, we're seeing evidence that the whole southern Florida area, the exact area, actually, that CNN just predicted will have a spike in COVID. We're going to, go down to Miami, and suddenly, everyone there is going to have coronavirus, and we're going to be blamed, even though this study says it's going to happen. But I do think the second cities will boom, but I think maybe the third-tier cities, particularly if they're college towns, you got to avoid them. So be careful of those. By the way, I do want to say thank you guys we've been doing these IG lives, these Instagram lives since March 12th, pretty consistently. And, many of you been on here for several of them or most of them, or even if you're just here for just this one. And I really appreciate it. We're really all going through something, and the more ways you can find community in your life, the more ways you can find sources, even difficult to find sources for accurate information, the better chances you have of surviving and then flourishing through this. So we've been talking about business models, stock ideas, side hustle ideas, or even just more nuanced skills like negotiation, copywriting, relationships, and so on. And I really I think you guys, we're all seekers for the truth in a very uncertain time, and we're all building that skill of dealing with uncertainty and finding a little more certainty in our lives, accurate certainty. So I applaud you guys for showing up for these shows. And now Rob and I have been putting as of yesterday, I think Jay can confirm, but as of yesterday or today, we're also taking these IG lives and putting it alongside my podcast. So if you subscribe to my podcast, you'll also start seeing these IG lives. And again, I really appreciate it. You've been a real source of inspiration for me as well. So I'm gonna go to questions.
And also too, I mean, with everything opening up, what do you think about changing the time? Is this a good time? Should we ask?
Yeah. So we've been doing this at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every day. And is this a good time for you guys, or is 10 a.m. a better time? Just think about it. Like I've noticed, 2 p.m. seems to be a pretty good time, but a lot of other people are doing IG lives now, and also a lot of people are going back to work. I don't know what's just the best time for you guys if you were to change the time. If you had and we'll listen and see what the best time is for everybody. We're not going to stop. So okay, Jeannine, you say stick with 2 p.m. I have noticed though that I think in the very beginning everyone was so concerned. What does every piece of data mean? And so there was maybe a lot more audience, and that's died down a little bit. But I think the good news is that we have moved from a period of intense uncertainty. How many people are going to die from this? How many people are going to get it? What states are going to be hit hardest? When am I going to get my job back? What stimulus will happen in the economy? What's going to happen to stocks? There was so much uncertainty that I think people were, and me too, we were all clinging, trying to find some certainty in the news. And I'm grateful I've been able to help people interpret some of it. I think we've been pretty dead on with all the predictions, and it's been good. So, and of course, most importantly is coming up with the BS headlines of the day and the truthful headlines of the day and exploring that. But anyway, I'm going to check out Jay's questions here, or that you've been providing, Jay. I wish I can change the brightness on this. I'm going to have to figure that out, Jay. What's the survival temperature of COVID-19? We were just discussing that. Well, this study that just came out on CNN says that temperature doesn't matter. I think there's been a lot of debate. We don't really know if temperature matters. There's been anecdotal evidence just by how you view coronavirus in the United States. There's been anecdotal evidence that the higher the temperature, the fewer cases. So Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Florida haven't had as much cases all combined as just New York City, we had an unusually long winter. It was cold. I mean, it was 36 degrees 2 days ago yesterday in New York City. Yeah. And it's almost June. So I think my gut is because I have studied for 27 years epidemiology and immunology at Harvard, at Oxford, at Cambridge. I do think 80-degree temperature and humidity slow down the virus. Several doctors and specialists who have come on my podcast suggested the same thing, and we'll see. I don't believe this study. I think this study is BS. I think all these mathematical studies are BS. I pointed out many of the reasons in earlier episodes. I pointed out many reasons why these studies are BS. They're not taking into account the actual math behind the growth of pandemics and the actual math that has occurred already. But who knows what they did in this study? I'm sure it's just as much bullshit as any other study. We could pay attention to it, but keep an open mind. And so I do think the higher the temperature, the less likely of cases. You haven't heard about an outbreak in Mexico City, for instance, and that's hot as hell over there. So, and yet you have heard about outbreaks in New York City, Boston, and so on, Seattle.
But they're locking down more in Kuwait right now.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's hot there.
Is that because there's more cases?
I believe so.
Like a lot of cases, or they just don't want...
I didn't research it, but just a friend of mine there says that they have 2 hours. They have to register online to go out for 2 hours a day. They can only go out for 2 hours just to get groceries. And they have to register online.
So that's like in France. So a friend of ours, Bill Batiste, who's been on my podcast, and he wrote an excellent book called The Power Bible. Bill says in Nice, he has to stamp out when he leaves his apartment and stamp back in when he comes in. So they know you're only allowed outdoors so many minutes a day. And they're pretty strict with that. I'm glad they did not do that in New York City, or everybody would have been in trouble. Yeah. But Here's a good question that somebody asked. Someone says, I feel like my writing is shit, and how do I avoid criticizing myself? This is a really this is a really great question about creativity in general, because there's so many different angles on this. Number one, it's very easy to smoke your own crack. So when I first started writing, I thought my writing was amazing. Like, there's something called Dunning-Kruger bias, which makes you think that your work is better than it actually is because it's you. And so, for instance, you might say someone else's work is shit, but it's very rare that you think your own work is, because it's me. So I think I'm great. And it's healthy if you do think your work is shit, because you're avoiding that Dunning-Kruger bias. This is particularly important when you're starting a company and you go out there and start raising money and you think customers are going to automatically come because, hey, it's me. So customers are automatically going to come. It's very important to ask, to say, am I smoking crack? Like, I used to, when I started a business, I asked myself that question every single day. And when I'm writing, but when I'm writing, I don't ask that, because when you're first starting something, you can just assume 100% of what you're doing sucks. So nobody starts off and they're a brilliant writer from day one. And by the way, most people, even when they are brilliant writers, they have some things that are good, some things that are bad. Ernest Hemingway, if you Google Ernest Hemingway and Max Perkins was Ernest Hemingway's editor, you'll see the difference between a first draft that Ernest Hemingway submitted and all of the edits Max Perkins does. Max Perkins would rewrite The Old Man and the Sea. He would rewrite so much stuff, and you would see all his corrections. Ernest Hemingway barely knew how to spell, didn't know grammar. Max Perkins would rewrite entire sentences. Ditto for another great short story writer, Raymond Carver. His editor was Gordon Lish. You could see that one of Raymond Carver's famous short stories is What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. There's versions of the first draft, and then there's the Gordon Lish draft, and you can see all the edits. So it's okay if you, particularly in the beginning, your work's going to suck 100% of the time. And then even at the end, when you've been doing it 20 years, your work's going to suck 50% of the time. The key is that when I'm writing, I just finished the book, for instance. During the first draft, sometimes I would look at chapters and I would say, ugh, this is horrible. What am I doing? But then I would tell myself, that's okay. This is just the first draft. Finish the first draft. Every book that I've ever published has had no less than 30 or 40 drafts, some up to 100 drafts. This book I'm currently working on now is probably on the 15th or 20th draft. Every article I write goes through like 5 to 10 drafts. Every post, even tweets, I write 4th, 5th, 6th drafts. So it's really important to know that real writing is rewriting. Your first draft is just, it's like you're building it's like you're drawing a picture of the car, but there's no engine in there yet. So it's not going to drive. Real building, real creativity, real writing is in the 10th draft. It's in the rewriting. And always assume that. So if you say, oh, my work sucks, and you start criticizing yourself, that's fine. Congratulations that you're not falling for Dunning-Kruger bias, but just assume this is going to get better. You're going to rewrite, and real writing is rewriting. So that's a quotable quote. You could steal it. Real writing is rewriting, and it's really important. That's true for all creativity. There is no such thing as inspiration that hits you like a lightning bolt. I write 10 ideas a day to exercise the creativity muscle, and then everything I write, I just assume it is shit in the first draft, and it's the rewriting that will bring out the gems. That's when I really tighten it up, and I take out extra sentences, and I take out extra words. Here's an excellent trick, a very excellent trick. If you write an article or a book or a story or a post, an excellent trick is, as soon as you're done writing, take out the first paragraph and take out the last paragraph, and I bet you your article will be better. Even if you know this rule, even if you're writing the first paragraph and you say to yourself, James, I'm going to end up taking this paragraph out anyway, but so I know this rule already. Doesn't matter. Even if you know the rule, at the end of an art, when you write your first draft, take out the first paragraph, take out the last paragraph. I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, the writing will read better and the story will be better. It'll be better. People will like your first sentence better, and so on. So again, don't criticize yourself too harshly. Wait for the rewrites, and even in the rewrites, never criticize yourself because there's always more rewriting. So put your faith in your ability to rewrite. And then the only other thing I would say about this is read a lot of good writing, which doesn't mean read nonfiction. The best writers are the best literary fiction writers. So read Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, read short stories by Amy Hempel, read, whoever your favorite literary writers are. Don't read Shakespeare because that was written in the 1590s and it's bullshit. So don't read that. That won't teach you about good writing. So, what do you think? Do you criticize yourself? So you're obsessed with, I shouldn't say obsessed. You're an extremely good parent. I criticize myself on parenting. You're a much better parent than I will ever be. It's too late for me now. Aww. And my kids are good kids, but the parenting time is almost over. Would you ever criticize yourself on parenting? Do you ever feel like that notion of rewriting a parenting decision?
Yes, I mean, the thing is that the kids are all different, so you cannot do to one of them that you would do to the other because it just doesn't really work that way. So I try to treat them all the same. They all get the same. I'm like a communist at home.
I play favorites. So I give my favorite child more and my least favorite child less. So
but you just, they respond differently. So you really have to go down to their level and figure out what makes them tick.
But what do you do when you think to yourself later, oh, I just made a horrible parenting mistake? Like, what's an example of that maybe? If you have one. I don't know if you have one. Well, you're a perfect parent, so.
I mean, I have many, but no, I don't know. I just start over, the next day I change. If it's something at night, I usually take account of what I've done and how I did it. And then the next day I just reboot and I learn.
You ever have, and this applies to you, but also to you guys, you ever have a situation where you go to a party or you have a business interaction and you're dealing with people, and then later at night you're thinking, oh man, I just made such an enormous fool of myself, and you just can't get over it, and there's no way to rewrite because the interaction already happened. Like, oh, I should have said this, or I shouldn't have blurted out that. You ever have that?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
Well, all you do is, the only thing you can do is just change. Don't do it again.
Yeah, because it is what it is.
It is what it is. So
it is what it is.
Deal with it. So, and the kids don't come with a book, a manual, so you just have to figure it out.
I wish kids did come with a manual. Like they just come out of the womb. They're like, here's the manual for John.
But I would say to go with more of your gut feeling as parenting, more with instincts. I think that's super important, and don't let society dictate what you should do with your kids, because you do, people do judge you, and they try to control you by, society, you should do it this way, or you don't want your kid to sleep in bed with you, or you should do this. I mean, just do what you feel is best for you and your family. That's
such an important point, because just like there are fads in companies, and there are fads in products, and there are fads in TV shows and social media platforms, there's fads in the way you're supposed to treat others. So, for instance, with parenting, there was a fad at one point, the Ferber method, where you let your baby cry all night, and then they learn not to cry. Well, your baby is not sitting there thinking, I really need to learn how not to cry. Your baby is just a baby, and it's hungry, and it's lonely, and it's scared, and it just starts crying as a reaction, and it's going to get more scared, maybe, if it keeps crying. So that was a fad. I don't even know if that's a fad anymore.
It's sort of like we hand over our intelligence and our natural instincts to professors or doctors, where really we are born with these instincts. So, and it's sort of like everything. It's like we hand everything over to these professionals or these doctors. And whereas, you know what? I think we could figure it out in terms of parenting and such like that, typically.
I mean, think about it. Think about how many, here's a 10 idea list for people a little bit is how many people do you outsource your life to? So for instance, often we outsource, right now, a lot of people have been outsourcing their decisions to the mathematical models about coronavirus.
Yeah.
Oh, this mathematical model says I can't go within 27 feet of people. So I'm going to stay with it outside of 27 feet from people. Or this mathematical model says everything's fine, so I'm just going to spit on everyone else. So oftentimes we outsource major decisions to very unusual and unqualified, even proven wrong sources. Or we might outsource our ethics to a religious belief. Or we might outsource our self-esteem to a spouse. I certainly, if Robin is upset at me, I can instantly tell because I feel bad about myself and I'm wondering why. So I have to not outsource my self-esteem to Robin. I think it's too much of a tendency when you fall for somebody to outsource your self-esteem to them. And it's hard enough for them to deal with their own self-esteem, let alone yours also, because I'm a wreck. So, I outsource my knowledge maybe to a boss or somebody I read or a mentor or whatever. When, you look at like great examples of mentorship, Carl Jung had Sigmund Freud as a mentor, but eventually he stopped outsourcing his belief systems to his mentor and he moved way past Freud. In fact, Freud is largely considered not the be all and end all, and Jung is still widely respected. So eventually for someone to be a good mentor, you can't demand that they outsource their beliefs and knowledge to you. You have to be a good mentor, you have to encourage people to develop their own belief systems by observing how you developed yours, but you don't want to dictate their belief systems. You don't want anybody to outsource anything to you. You want to be as independent as possible, not only from who you're outsourcing your knowledge to, but who's outsourcing their knowledge to you. You want to be free and clear of all outsourcing. So
somebody just said that not all parents are good parents, and that they have a neighbor that yells and cusses at their kids. And there are some people that have problems, and they drink, or they have issues with themselves. I mean, I guess that definitely would get in the way of good parenting. But two, you've got to start parenting your kids when they're babies, when they're little, and because it may be cute when they talk back to you at 1 or 2 or 3 years old.
But you got to just slap them down when they do that.
No, but you really have to really work with them starting very young, and you can't expect to just think that, oh, they're so cute, and at 5 or 6. And then let them, and then they're not cute as much at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 doing the same thing. So I've always really had my kids, I don't want to say trained, but I worked with them when they were very little to sit at a restaurant.
But let me ask you this though. Like on the one hand, you say, okay, use your parenting instincts because humans have been raising kids for millions of years and so on. But society evolves, and the way kids grow evolves, and the way parents grow evolve with society, often faster than the human brain. And I think you still have to figure out what your core values are right now for parenting, and you have to stick with them. So how would you go about developing those core values if let's say your mom or dad wasn't a good parent and you really want to be a good parent because it's a valuable responsibility?
Well, I think it starts with grounding your kids and making them feel safe and secure. So like letting a baby cry, that's not good.
Right, but what I'm saying is though, not what your instincts are, but how do you develop those? How do you develop the core knowledge to have core values?
I guess you just transfer your core values that you have that's important to you, because you're creating these human beings, right? You're.
But how do you know you have good core values? Let's say you got your values from your mom, and let's say she wasn't a good parent.
Well, I don't know. I think you just have to go with what feels good on the inside of you. Now, if you're not a good parent, I don't know. I mean, I think people that treat their kids abuse them and those things. I think they have big problems with
Right.
themselves. So
But-
I think as a parent, if you're a good parent, you're going to just feel, you just automatically know what to do.
But
And you
it,
don't, outsource your parenting.
But it also sort of seems like you're saying you got lucky in that you have the right parenting values, but other people also might think they got lucky and have the right parenting values, and they might think, oh, well, when my kid behaves poorly, I need to hit them, which was, just a generation ago, that's how parents
No,
thought.
that's what happened to me.
Me too.
With a
So
wooden spoon.
I had
I
my
never
mom's
hit my
fist, but she had polio, so it was okay. But how would you learn about parenting?
I read a lot.
Oh, so that's important. You read a lot.
I did a lot of research, but there was not one way of doing things that I believed in. I read so many books, and then I just sort of, picked out certain parts that felt good to me and for each child, because one idea or one solution is not the solution for another child.
Do you think you experimented with ideas as you were
absolutely.
So I think experimentation is important. Like you try different things
for sure.
that
I'm still doing that.
that have not that the downside's not so big. So like hitting, for instance, the downside's huge. So you'd want to find some way maybe of experimenting with different forms of discipline where there's not huge downside, but there is huge upside. So like, what would be an example of experiment when, the kids are little?
Well, I mean, they would fight. One time they were fighting in the car over a toy, and I said, well, first of all, you have to, whenever you say to a child, if you do that, I'm going to do this. You have to follow through. You can't just say, I told you, if you do that, and then they don't believe you. So one time I remember they were all in the car, and they were fighting over this toy, and I said, if you don't stop fighting over this toy, I'm going to pull over and I'm going to throw that toy out the window. And so they kept on, and I did. I pulled over, I got the toy, and I threw it out the window. Okay.
Litter, environment.
That was bad. But I made a point, and hopefully somebody picked it up and played with it. I don't know. But they never, ever did that again.
Yeah,
They were in shock. In fact, they didn't even speak for, 20 minutes. They were just all three looking straight in the car. Like, it was just so shocking to them.
That's
But
interesting.
they'll never forget that.
And I think this notion of experimenting we've talked about before. Even with writing, don't be afraid to experiment. So, I often, if I have an idea, I'll try it out as a Facebook post first before I post it on a blog or an article, or heck, come up with different ways to experiment. Write a nonfiction article as if it was a thriller, or write a nonfiction article in terms of letters back and forth to people. So there's always ways to experiment with structure, with style.
Yeah.
Write a nonfiction article where you mix the first person, second person, and third person, which is saying I versus you versus we. So, all right.
Someone just asked, have I trained a dog? And yes, I love training animals. And not that my kids are animals, but it is very similar to training, an animal.
Okay, so tell me.
Because you have to be very consistent. That
Right.
is the number one rule, is being very consistent.
So-
Because
so
they're
ca-
smart.
Right, so if they sense that you're not consistent,
Oh,
then
yeah,
they're going to
that's-
start to push at the
That's right.
boundaries. Here's the one thing. Kids and dogs are very sensitive to where boundaries are. And if they sense that they view the parent or the owner, in the case of a dog, they view the parent as a prison, and they're constantly poking for the bars of that prison
Well-
where there might be a hole that they could escape through.
Actually, I believe, though, that kids like boundaries because it gives them a sense of security. I really believe that. And if you don't give kids boundaries, I believe that they don't feel safe.
Right. 'cause
Even
then
though they say they don't like it, they do like it.
Right, because if they don't sense the boundaries from the parents, maybe they feel like, boy, my parents don't know what they're doing, and maybe there's some sense if shit really hits the
Right.
fan, my parents just are not going to be able to survive it.
Yeah. So structure, like this person, structure is good, and it really is, and it helps ground them, and that's what you want. You want a child that's grounded, because that's where it all starts.
I love this quote. Hi Anthony says, "Love them enough to create and enforce boundaries."
That's right. Because if you don't, that's true. It's like they say, tough love, but you've got to do that, because then they'll never respect you, number one, and they won't learn. And you want to create human beings that people want to be around, right? Like, I want to be around my kids because they're good, kids. They don't lie. They don't, they're respectful. And I remember before I had kids, I would go out to a restaurant and I'd sit next to a family and the kids would be running around or throwing food, and it would disgust me. I was like, God, do I really even want kids? Because I would never let my kids do that. And I was an older parent, I was I think 32 when I first, had my child. And, but I would never let them run around. I never let them throw food. I never let them do those things. And for that, I was able to take them to any restaurant I wanted. And they sat there, and I used to get so many compliments because I had 3 all in a row. I had 3 kids in 4 years. And they were all young, and they would sit at the table. They knew how to eat properly with a fork, put their napkin on their lap. I worked. It was hard because I was like a broken record, but they learned, and I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree. I did not have that example growing up. Like, I'd go out to dinner with my parents. They would drink, and eventually food would be thrown, but it was usually my parents throwing the food. Like, what would happen is my dad would get so drunk, he would spill his drink on my mom, and then she would throw food. Oh, no. So, and then my sister and I would look at each other like, here we go again, and we'd leave. This is an interesting question because this applies to all creativity. Any ideas on how the music industry, and let's just say any creative industry, but the music industry is interesting. Any ideas how the music industry will evolve after this pandemic and lockdown? And I think the one thing is the music industry already has evolved, like with the rise of digital. There's no more record stores. There's no more records. There's no more DVDs with music on it or CDs or whatever. When I want to listen to a song, I just go to YouTube, or in rare cases, Spotify. I usually just go to YouTube or Alexa and play the music. So how do people make money? So because of this transformation, musicians were making money on tour, but now they don't have tour anymore because, events are closed down. So I think it's good to not know. Like, I don't really know the answer. I don't really know the answer to that question. Like, I think here's an interesting thing. Go to I think it's royaltyexchange.com or Google Musical Royalty Exchange. You can actually buy the royalties of some of your favorite songs. Like, there was an album that was being an album of the soundtrack of Friends. You could buy part of the rights to those royalties for the next 20 years. And I think there's going to be interesting business models buying and selling streams of income, in the music industry. Because in the music industry, there's publishing rights, there's royalties from that, there's royalties from tours, there's royalties from other appearances of the musician, and there might be exchanges where people could, make money off these things. But I don't really know how the music industry is going to change. Every industry is going to change somewhat, and the music industry has already been changing. And I always had confidence that musicians would survive from touring, but now that's unclear. So we'll see. Someone said, how did I come up with the idea for the title Choose Yourself? The Choose Yourself concept is super important to me, which is that all the time people want to choose things for you. So I remember, like your parents want you to live in a city close to them, or your professors want you to take a certain type of job, or your friends want you to go to a certain type of college, or your family want you to have a certain type of house or a certain type of, political beliefs, or your neighbors want you to vote for the same people they do. Everybody wants to, your boss wants you to not switch companies. Everybody has plenty of choices for you. And if you don't start to choose yourself and figure out what your values are, and B, how those values manifest themselves in your life, you're going to end up letting people choose your life for you, and I can guarantee you the results will not be as good as if you choose yourself. So what's an example? Let's say I write a book and an agent says no, publishers say no, and so on. I can choose myself, and I could upload the book to Amazon and sell it and self-publish on Amazon. And no one will even know that I self-published. I'll say it's, JAA Publishing. Boom, that's who published it. Or I could call it, I don't know, I can make up a name. Synergy Publishing, Inc. That's my publisher. No one will know that I self-published. And yet, many successful books. 50 Shades of Grey was originally self-published. And it sold 250,000 copies before, I think, Random House. 50 Shades of Grey was self-published. She had built, E.L. James had built up a fan page, audience on the Twilight flash fiction page or fan fiction page. She had been writing fan fiction for Twilight. She converted that into her own novel, 50 Shades of Grey, and she had an audience. It sold 250,000 copies. And she went to Amazon and she said to Amazon, will you officially publish it? Amazon has publishing companies. Amazon rejected her, and so she had to go out to Random House. They accepted her, and there was a couple months where 1 out of 3 books sold around the world was 50 Shades of Grey. So she chose herself. She self-published, chose herself. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle was originally self-published. He chose himself. John Grisham, we talked about the other day, his first book, which his first written book was A Time to Kill, he basically self-published when everybody rejected him. And then he wrote The Firm, which became a huge hit. So many successful people. Richard Branson, we talked about yesterday. He was a music magazine publisher. He wanted to start an airline. Everyone told him, you can't start an airline. Well, who do you think you are? He chose himself. There's always, behind every success is somebody who chose themselves. Nobody is going to wake up and say, today is the day I make James Altucher rich. Like, nobody will ever in the history of mankind do that. So I'm constantly on the lookout for how to choose myself among the things that I'm interested in and passionate about and willing to put the work in to choose myself. And so how did I title Choose Yourself? That was part of it. The other thing is I had a bunch of title ideas, and Ryan Holiday suggested some ideas. Tucker Max suggested some ideas. Other people suggested ideas. I made Facebook ads for every title and put them on Facebook. And then I'm able to measure which ad got the most clicks. And the ad that had Choose Yourself, which was my idea for the title, the ad that had Choose Yourself got 80% of the clicks. So that helped me make the decision, and that's why Choose Yourself was the title. I also like the fact that it was a call to action, which I thought was very important. Where are you heading?
I'll be right back.
She's going to be right back. Who is this woman? She's my wife. So somebody just asked, who is this woman? So, do you think we'll see another huge run-up in the stock market as the result of all the government stimulus? And hey, someone says, "Hey, get back here!" And he came back. So someone's asking about future podcast guests. I will get to that in a second. So, do I think there will be another run-up in the stock market because of more stimulus? And the answer is yes. But also, I do think the stock market is going to go up regardless of the stimulus. Part of the reason is that several reasons. One is the U.S. had a strong economy before this started. It's not like 2007, 2008, 2009, where the country was already going into recession, and then it got much worse. Then the financial system almost collapsed, and then we had to dig our way out of that. This economy was strong. Now, if 10 weeks of lockdown is enough to completely annihilate the economy, then I would say we probably weren't as strong as we thought in the beginning. But the reality is we probably were pretty strong going into this, and so that gives us a good head start coming out of it. Now, the other answer is all the public companies, like, and I've talked about Starbucks, but you could talk about Google, Amazon, Walmart, Walgreens, Tesla, all the competition that was under-financed, they're all going out of business. So again, with Starbucks, all the mom and pop cafes, not all of them, but a good percentage of them, 40% of them, are going out of business. Starbucks isn't. So Starbucks is going to have more market share, more profits, and their stock's going to go up and that's a bad reason why their stocks are going to go up. Like, it's an ugly reason, but that's the reality, is that stocks are going to go up because all the competition, the smaller Main Street competition, the mom and pop competition is going out of business. And that's unfortunate, but it does mean those many stocks will go up because of that. And then finally, there's a saying, and this has been a saying for 100 years. There's a saying called "Don't fight the Fed." If the Fed is pouring trillions of dollars into the economy and they're lowering interest rates to zero, then eventually the stock market, where else is money going to go? If trillions of dollars are put in your bank account, eventually it's going to go from your bank account to the stock market for many reasons. The first reason is that the money in your savings account is only getting 0% interest. At least with the stock market, you have a chance of making money. So the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates because they make it less attractive to hold on to cash and more attractive to put it into stocks. If you combine that with the fact that the Fed is probably already buying stocks, and you combine that with the fact that everybody's just going to have more money because of these stimulus packages, again, eventually people save some of that money and it goes into the stock market. So I think in the next few years, you can easily see the stock market double from here. It's not unreasonable at all to think that. Don't forget, right now, we're like a bunch of drug addicts. So when you first go into drug rehab, you say to yourself, I'm a drug addict, I need help, whatever. By the end of drug rehab, you say to yourself, I'm never going to use drugs again. And that's what, like, people now. I'm never going to go to restaurants again. I'm never going to big concerts again. I'm never going on a cruise again. But then you get out of drug rehab and you start hanging out with the same old friends and going to the same locations, and suddenly you start using drugs again. So we're going to more quickly than we realize get back to our normal habits when this is over. It might not be the first day, but it might be a few months later or a year later. But I do think there's going to be some return to normal. It's not just going to be a new normal. There's also going to be the old normal is still with us. And again, we've only been locked up for 10 weeks. And as much as I've been against a lot of aspects of the lockdown, and I thought they were unnecessary and caused unnecessary suffering and pain, I don't think this was the death knell of the economy. If we had shut down for a year, that's a different story. We're going to come back. You already see, you showed me a photo yesterday of Miami, an ice cream store in Miami. There was a line around the corner. So people are going back and doing their messy, germ-filled activities again. So, Victoria, people are addicts. We are natural addicts. We're addicted to our routines. They're not going to change just because the government told us to wear a mask for a few weeks. I was just talking to someone from Arizona, the CEO of a major company, and he said he was out to dinner with his wife last night at a restaurant, and there were about 40 people in the restaurant. He said the only person wearing a mask was his wife, because she's a germaphobe. And and nobody else in this restaurant was wearing a mask because Arizona had hardly any cases. They're just not that worried. So it's gonna. So John August is saying same here. So somebody's asked. Jack Dillon's asking, who are some future podcast guests that I'm excited about? There's actually quite a few, and I can't even remember. Sometimes I have a hard time remembering who's been on my podcast, but I will tell you that I have quite a few guests who I'm very excited about, but I can't. Jay, who are some of the guests that I've had on the show? I can't even remember. Matt Ridley was just released. Matt Ridley was somebody I've been hoping for 6 years, since 2014. I have a guest coming up, Maria Konnikova. So Maria Konnikova is an interesting story. She definitely chose herself. She started off with zero knowledge of the rules of poker. She had a coach, Eric Seidel, who's the best poker player in history, teach her the rules and then teach her strategies. And within a year, she had won over $250,000 in poker tournaments. And she's coming on the podcast next week, and we'll release a few weeks after that. So that's an example. I like people who choose themselves and who demonstrate something extraordinary and something that gives me hope that I could be maybe extraordinary. And I like to learn. I like to learn from my guests. I don't even know who I've had on the podcast recently. So yeah, Annie Duke, just speaking of poker, Annie Duke has another book coming out. Her first book, Thinking in Bets, was great. I think her next book is about what's possible in life. She's a professional poker player, one of the strongest female poker players. And I'm going to try to get her on the podcast. We'll see. We had a fun time the last time she was on the podcast. And Barry Michaels, I was just talking to his son, Jesse Michaels, actually. Jesse's a good friend of mine. And Barry, I've been a fan of for a long time. He's a therapist to the stars, but he wrote this great book called The Tools of Psychological Tricks that people could use to make their lives better. And I will ask Barry to come back on again. What are some guests you guys would like to see? I just had on Representative Tim Ryan from Ohio. He's a Democrat congressman who's very solution-oriented. I would like to get, on the opposite side of the aisle, I'd like to get Representative Dan Crenshaw on the podcast, so I'm reaching out to him. Gary V has been on the podcast 3 or 4 times. Jocko's been on 3 or 4 times. But yeah, I'll get those guys on again. Mike Tyson, I want to go on his podcast. Tim Ferriss, certainly I'll get him on again. I would like to talk to him. Jim Jordan is a possibility. He was very emphatic during the impeachments. Jay, do you have any idea who I've had on recently? Because I forget. Who's in the pipeline? Snoop Dogg's a possibility. Ray J was recently on, and Ray J works with Snoop a lot. Tony Robbins has been on quite a bit. So we'll see. I just forget who I've had on recently. Hi, James. Can you talk about what people can do to make themselves recession-proof in this climate? Yes, I thought you were going to ask about climate change, but recession-proof. So what you mean about this climate is, are you involved in businesses that aren't going to go up and down based on what the economy does as we get out of this, and based on what the if there's a second wave, if there's another pandemic, and so on. So a couple things. One is always think in terms of remote. What can you do that's remote? Always think in terms of multiple sources of income. So here's, we've talked about some side hustles. I'm going to talk more about it in another podcast. We're almost at the end of this one. But, for instance, pretend, one source of income is you decide to be a virtual assistant. So you sign up for various virtual assistant sites like Zirtual or whatever. There's a whole bunch of sites. If you Google virtual assistant, there's a whole bunch of sites you can sign up for. Maybe some people will ask you for help them with travel arrangements. Some people will ask you to help them with social media. Or let's say you start off with somebody who needs help organizing their email and travel, and then you suggest, hey, you're doing nothing for social media. There's a big opportunity here. Now you scale your opportunities with that person. Then maybe you get a bunch of clients that way. Now you have a social media agency. You're not just a virtual assistant. So you come up with these different sources of income and then figure out how to expand them into businesses. Ebooks is another one. I will talk more about ebooks and side hustles. There's only 1 minute, 24 seconds left. So I do want to say again, I really appreciate everybody listening to these. I admire the fact that many of you have remained optimistic and forward-thinking through these times, and we've been a community, and you've developed a community in these IG Lives and in the comment sections where we store them. So we'll save this video to my IGTV, we'll save it to my YouTube, and also it's going to start coming out as a podcast. And yes, I'll be here 2 p.m. Monday, and both of us will be here on 2 p.m. Monday for another IG Live. I'll talk more about side hustles and specific stocks. And everybody, talk to you soon. Thank you very much.